we were about 30 feet underwater. And we went to the surface, and I swear that is the big gasp of air that I ever experienced as a swimmer. We
Yeah,
were
I'd
30
imagine.
feet underwater. I was working my ass off trying to get this guy up, pedaling, kicking my fins. Poor guy thought he was going to drown. He told me that later on. And so when we come to the surface, he took a big gasp of air and he hugged me.
Welcome to the Calm in the Chaos podcast, where we discuss untold heroic experiences and dive into the mindset of the Navy's elite rescue swimmers. Hosted by former U.S. Navy Aviation Rescue Swimmer, Mount Everest solo summiteer, and best-selling author Brian Dickinson.
All right, I'm excited to have the legendary Rick Shoaf on today. After 30 years, retiring back in 2000. Man, it's already been almost a quarter century since you retired. That's nuts. As a Master Chief, just a slew of stories. One of the OG legends in the community. It's just an honor to have you on, and I'm excited to have a conversation.
Thank you.
So Rick, for the few people out there that don't know you,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your childhood, like where you grew up.
I grew up just south of Columbus. I grew up on a farm. I was raised on a farm. And 7 miles from the town that Grove City, Ohio, 7 miles from a high school. And I grew up as a farmer's kid. I mean, that's what I did. That's how I got the work ethic that I
Hmm.
have.
Yeah, I bet.
That's how I treat people, is because of what I learned on the farm with my dad and my grandpa, my grandma, and my mom. It was a family farm, so we were all there. The house that we lived in was built in 1854. And just to give you an idea of how big this house was and why so many people lived there, we had 8 bedrooms in that house. It was huge.
Wow.
And it's on the National Registry of uh, Houses, or whatever it's called. It's on the
Hmm.
National Registry. The only way you can get on there is to have someone famous sleep there that was documented, or
Okay.
by the architecture, and ours made it by the architecture.
Right on.
So it
So
was good
yeah,
life.
so it's still there.
Oh, absolutely.
That's awesome.
I
Um,
wanted to buy it, but the people who own it don't want to give it up because they know what a good thing they have.
yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, that's gold right there. That would be neat to buy. So you decided to join the Navy. What year was that?
1970. That was the year that the lottery was for the draft,
Hmm.
and we were all sitting in the living room watching TV while they pulled the birth dates out of the fishbowl. My birthday was number 12. That year they went to 185. And when they pulled it out, I went into vapor lock. I was like, because I'd had two friends that graduated a year before I did. Both went to Vietnam in the Marine Corps, and one came back with no legs, and one came back in a body bag. And
Sorry.
so I really didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So my dad looked at me, said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go join the Navy." So the next day I went down, joined the Navy. It was like a delayed entry thing.
Hmm.
So in 10 days after I graduated from high school, I was in boot camp up in Great Lakes.
Oh.
I was going to do 4 years and get out and go back to being a farmer because I really liked that life. I liked being a farmer. And but the Navy um, sent me to school, taught me how to work on helicopters, uh, taught me how to save lives, issued me a bag of rubber, wetsuit, fins, mask, snorkel. They put a 19-year-old kid in charge of a multi-million-dollar helicopter, and girls dug guys in flight suits. So 30 years, or 4 years, turned into 30.
Yeah,
And I don't regret one day.
that's great. So when you went in, you went it because it wasn't SAR, like the official program didn't really exist yet, correct?
Right.
So you're on the cusp of that and paving the way. So what did the schooling, the training look like when you
I
went
was
in?
homegrown. I was out on Midway Island, like I told you earlier. Um, I flew a H-34. That was my first rescue. It was in a 30 H UH-34D, and they just I was an airman at the time, and they come up and they said, "Hey, we're short on rescue swimmers. Would you like to be one?" And I'm like, "Well, what do they do?" They said, well, you jump in the water and save people. And I go, yeah, I don't know. They said, it's an extra $50 a month. And I said, sign me up.
Right.
Because at
That's big
that
money.
time, every payday I was getting like $120 a payday. So an extra $50, absolutely.
Yeah, significant. Wow. So what did the training look like?
It, can you swim?
Then what about like training? Because it was on the job, right? You're out there. Are you
It
guys
was
doing
OJT. It was like, okay, here's the helicopter, here's the systems, here's the NATOPS. And my first question is, what's a NATOPS? And so they told me what the NATOPS was. So I studied it. I got with guys, that were crewmen out there already. Um, really good dudes. They were the old ADRs, you know. And the
Mhm.
H-34, it had the 1820 recip in it. And so all the crewmen out there were ADRs, and I was a ADJ at the time.
Yeah, my dad was an ADJ.
Yeah. Well, I started out as an AB. I was an ABH. And then I cross-rated because I got to really liking this flying gig. And so, because I was running the transient line, or I was the assistant line supervisor. And so they wanted to put me in the crash crew. So I changed my rate to AD. And that way I was guaranteed to keep on flying and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but it was all OJT, just word of mouth. And then
Mhm.
they had sort of they didn't really have a NATOPS instructor out there. It was just a guy who, qualified as plane captain. And then after a period of time, a crew chief. And then I was like, you're a swimmer because you know how to swim.
Yep. So were you guys doing like SAR jumps, like kind of
Oh
on the
yeah.
job training and
Yeah, we
yeah.
did SAR jumps out in the bay on Midway.
Hmm.
And the way that it was set up was um, you had the island on the southern end of this. It was actually it's a mountaintop, and you had a reef that went all the way around the island, and it was 5 miles from one side to the other side of the reefs. So we'd do waterworks, or we'd do jumps out in the middle of this. We call it Wells Harbor, and we'd go out there and we'd jump out of the H-34, and then we eventually transitioned to HH-46 alphas.
Mm.
Then we'd go out and we'd do training in the 46s. And then we always had to have a safety boat with a sharpshooter because we had a lot of sharks out there.
Mm. It's good to have. That helps. I'm curious, like this is all fascinating. I mean, I love the history of it all. I mean, in my book, Calm on the Chaos, I spent some time just doing the research and, just trying to educate because I don't think a lot of even rescue swimmers that go through necessarily knew a lot of it. I didn't. But just from an equipment standpoint, like even when I was in 93 to 99 and my gear sucked, I can't imagine what you had back then.
It's absolutely, and this was our gear. This was our gear. It was like amazing, you know?
State of the art.
Yeah, right.
I'm imagining like wooden fins and like the steel diver's helmet and
No, no, it was, we had like, we had these old hand-me-down wetsuit tops, and we had fins and masks like you've seen that movie Mike Nelson with Sea Hunt with the round oval
Mhm,
mask. That's what
mhm.
we had, and we had some of us had snorkels and some of us didn't.
Yeah.
And for my flight equipment, I had a jet puke helmet, or excuse me, a jet helmet with the oxygen where the oxygen mask goes,
Hmm.
and a Mae West. That was it. And a flight suit. That was our flight equipment.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
It's come a long ways. But because of people like yourself, I mean, you're out there doing the hard work and getting us there. So definitely appreciate all that you've done. Um, what squadrons and deployments did you do in your 30 years?
You know, my service record. Okay. My very first,
Just pretty fast, quickly go through.
okay, Midway Island. I mean, I was out there, it was started out to be a 13-month isolated duty tour, but I got out there and it was like McHale's Navy. And I ended up staying there from 1972 to 1976. So I was there for 4 years. I was one of the few people who stayed out there active duty a long time. I'm one of the like handful of people that did that. And I just kept extending. And one night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the barracks watch came up and said, "Hey, Shoaf, your detailer's on the phone." I'm like, "Okay." So I went down. I said, "Hey, it's Petty Officer Shoaf." He said, "Petty Officer Shoaf, this is Chief Combs. I'm your detailer." He said, "Do you know why I'm calling you?" He said, "I'm concerned about your mental health.
Wow.
I'm putting your request for a third extension, and you can go anywhere you want to go in the world, but you're not staying out there." And it was good because I enjoyed it out there. I played all Navy football for 2 years. All we did was go around the Pacific and play football, you know? So
Yeah, the good life.
that was awesome. Yeah. So it made me come back to States. So I went to, I picked Pax River. So I was at Pax River, search and rescue there. That's where they sent me to school because they said, "Okay, we have new rules now. You have to go to school to be a swimmer." So they
Mhm.
sent me to HS1 down in Jax. And that's where I went to SAR school to become an official rescue swimmer. And it was
Okay,
1977. That's when
nice.
I graduated.
How was that?
It was it was tough, but we started with a class of 32 and 9 of us graduated.
Yeah,
And not one time did I ever think about quitting.
yeah,
And there was a lot of guys that quit on the first day, you know.
yeah.
And we had this one guy, he was the class leader. I was an ADJ2. He was an AMS2. His name was Dar, but he had me beat and ranked by about a year. Well, he quit. He quit 2 weeks into the school. And so they made me the class leader. And then, like I said, there was only 9 of us that graduated.
Was
So,
it SAR swimmers that were running it or SEALs back then?
oh no, it was swimmers. Tafoya, Craig Dry, Bishop, Biggs, Jordan, um, all those guys, you know, the legends of the SAR community.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be interesting. I'd love to talk more about that and just what, just comparatively. I know things, even when I was in, have changed significantly to what they are now and
Mm.
always improving. Things are,
Oh,
for
yeah.
the better. But it's just always interesting to just know and wonder, would I have made it back in the old days? Would I make it today? If I
As
went
long
right
as you
now.
don't put that little seed in your brain about quitting, you can do anything you want.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, that's exactly my next question because there is such a high attrition rate. You got people dropping left and right. You made it through. Do you feel that's the major differentiator, your mindset?
But mindset, oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
there was times I felt like I wanted to quit,
Yeah.
but I don't quit nothing, you know.
Is that
And
good?
I never
Are
quit
there times when
anything.
maybe you should?
Yeah, well, maybe, but I not really.
Yeah.
But I never, not once did I ever think about quitting, no matter how tired I was, or how waterlogged I was, or how pissed off at the instructors I was. You know, they don't do it now, but Sharks and Daisies back then
Hmm.
separated a lot of the people from who made it and who didn't make it.
Yeah.
And no matter how pissed off you got, you know, you never quit.
Yeah. Um, well, good. I'm glad you didn't. So after SAR school, where'd you go?
After SAR school, I went back to Pax River
Oh, okay.
because I was at Pax for 3 months, and then they said they had to send me to school. So that was a 3-year tour. So I was at Pax River through 3 years, and then from there I went to the USS Nassau. I'm a skid kid. My sea time is all gator freighters.
Hmm.
So I went back. I went to the Nassau, and that was a pretty good tour. And you know, the Gators used to have the H-46s, and then they transitioned to the UH-1Ns, the twin engine Huey,
Hmm.
because they're less maintenance intensive than a 46. And we only had 4 swimmers, crew chiefs on board the Gators, and we're the ones that flew it and fixed it. And in my case, both my Gators that I was on, the AIMD would not help us at all. So it was all us. We'd fly all day
Mm.
long and then work all night for the inspections, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's brutal. Oh, then beyond that, like I want to get to the rescue that we talked about
Okay.
yesterday.
And then from the NASA, I went back to Pax River. I re-enlisted for orders back to Pax River. So I did 2 tours at Pax.
Okay.
That's when I got that rescue.
Okay. Well, you want to segue into that?
Sure. We had that's when they were developing the Harrier and the
Hmm.
F-18, you know, and I mean they were, you know, brand new on the scene kind of thing. And you know, Pax River is a big testing evaluation base.
Yep.
And so there was always these different projects going on that required SAR platforms. And so at the particular time we had the H3 and we had 3 birds, but we were really busy that day and they all 3 birds were occupied. They were out on other projects. And then so they were testing this one test directorate on base was testing these new parachutes that they were using. And I knew the commander that was in charge of it, and he was a pretty good guy, really. And he'd come down and talk to us about this new parachute, and he showed us the equipment and how it would work, and how, if we ever got in the water with someone with it, you know, what we should do and stuff like that. And so they said, well, you know, next week we're going to do a test, an actual jump out of an airplane test. So, and that was one of our birds that carried him up. Like I said, he was a '05. It carried him up to like 10,000 feet. And then he jumped out of the bird with this new test parachute. But I was on a boat. I was a boat swimmer that day.
Hmm.
We had just introduced the swimmers over to the boathouse there at Pax River. That was before boat swimmers went to school. So whenever they needed a boat swimmer, they would call us because we had 17 crewmen, and one of us would go over there, and they use this especially at nighttime. And one of us would go over there, and we'd be a boat swimmer for that night. Well, that day they were doing the test on the parachute. All 3 birds were in the air. The one bird took the commander up to 10,000 feet. He jumped out with this test chute. I was on the boat, and so we were watching, and we could see that he was having some difficulty. Oh, and there was a lieutenant on the boat with me, along with the boat crew from the test directorate that was doing the parachute. He was a lieutenant commander, and so we were watching him as he you know he jumped out and he was falling free falling and he got to I guess I don't know 5,000 feet or so, and he pulled the ripcord. Well, this parachute, the test chute, streamered. He had an issue with it. It was tacked wrong. I never did find out why it failed, but it failed. And at about I don't know, he messed with it for a while, and then we were sitting there going, holy crap, you know, and he had on a reserve chute, which was a normal parachute. He pulled the cord on this normal parachute. And when it fully inflated, he was at about, I don't know, maybe 1,000 feet. Well, he cut this test chute away. Well, the lieutenant commander on the boat said, we need to go get this parachute. And I'm like, no, we need to go get this guy, because I was a first class at the time. And I said, we need to go, when he hits the water, he's going to need help. No, we need the parachute to see what's wrong with it. I said, you understand, this guy's he's gonna have issues when he hits the water.
Yeah, no
And he
kidding.
said, no, we're going to get the boat. And he told the coxswain, BM2 Hamilton, he said, go to the parachute. I said, boats, drop me off about 100 yards from where he's going to come in the water. So he did. He got me a little bit close. And so I swam over to where he was coming down, and I got within maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 yards of him when he hit the water. And so by the time I got to him, the Patuxent River has a current of 2 to 3 knots. And his chute, as soon as he hit, his chute went underwater, and it was like a sea anchor. It just expanded like, you know, a sea anchor.
Yep.
And so I swam over to, and the wind was sort of blowing that day. And so it was pulling him away from me. And I was swimming as fast and as hard as I could to get to him. But the time I got to him, the chute had sank, and I'm trying to release the fittings on the chute.
Hmm.
And there was so much tension that it pulled him and I under the water.
Oh.
And so I was still trying to release the fittings, and I just couldn't because there was too much tension on them. So I reached for my the shroud cutter, and then when I pulled it out, I dropped it, but it was attached to my harness. So I fished around for it, picked it up, and got it, and I started cutting shroud lines. Well,
Like
that time,
tethered with string
yeah, it was with a parachute cord, shock cord.
cord. Yeah.
And so I started cutting shroud lines, but it wasn't really making any difference. And I had him by the harness, and I straddled his body, and I was kicking my fins as hard as I could, but we were being drug under. That was at 10 feet. We were 10 feet underwater. So I went to the surface. I let him go. I went to the surface, got a big breath of air, went back down. He was at 15 feet. And so I started cutting him again. And so we stopped going underwater for a little bit, and it was just the water was just pulling us. And so I'm trying to cut these shroud lines, and the shroud cutter it was dull. And
Mhm.
so I'm trying to hack away at these shroud lines. And so we were now at 20 feet. So I went to the surface. I had to let him go. I went to the surface again and took a big breath of air. And when I was up there, I took my SAR 1 and put a breath of air in it. And so when I went under, I swam down to him. It was about 25 feet. So I straddled him again. I held him with my legs, straddled him like a bicycle on a bicycle seat. And so I gave him my SAR run to give him a breath of air. And
Wow.
so I started cutting shroud lines. And
That's
then
genius, by the way.
I pulled out my knife and I started cutting shroud lines with my knife. And I always kept my knife really sharp. And so it started cutting shroud lines. So as soon as I started cutting shroud lines, the parachute deflated. I pulled his flotation, or I pulled no, I pulled my flotation, and I held on to him, and we went to the surface. We were about 30 feet underwater, and we went to the surface, and I swear that is the big gasp of air that I ever experienced as a swimmer. We
Yeah,
were
I'd
30
imagine.
feet underwater. I was working my ass off trying to get this guy up, pedaling, kicking my fins. Poor guy thought he was going to drown. He told me that later on. And so when we come to the surface, he took a big gasp of air and he hugged me. In the
No,
water, he hugged me.
that's
He said,
rare. Well,
he said, thank you.
that's amazing. Man, life over limb. You were willing to give your life. I mean, he's lucky to be alive. He didn't suck water or shallow water blackout, deep water blackout at that point.
And I
But
think me
you
giving
never
him a
gave
shot of
up.
air from my SAR 1 was a pretty good idea. I did that on the
It is,
floor.
and they don't teach us that. That is improvising in the
Right,
moment. This person's gonna, and you got to figure you are now creating more buoyancy, making it harder for you to dive down because now you've inflated, even if it's a breath of air, it's more
right.
buoyancy that you're pulling down. But how was that getting that, like trying to like even communicate in the darkness of the river to get him to take a breath? Was it pretty obvious once you stuck something near his mouth?
It wasn't even, I mean, it wasn't that dark. That river was, at that particular time, was fairly clear.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't crystal clear, but I mean, I had a visit
Still in
probably
the
about
midst of chaos,
4 or 5 feet.
the visibility,
All
everything.
I
It's
did was just took the hose off my SAR 1. I just stuck it in his mouth, and
yeah.
he knew what that was, and he took a big deeper breath. He
Oh,
he collapsed the SAR 1. That's how much he sucked
oh
air.
my gosh. I can't even imagine. Yeah, like as rescue swimmers and training and all that we do, we're always bordering that point of blacking out. That's how far they want to push instructors want to push us to see, how far are you going to take this?
Right.
I feel that's nothing compared to what you did, in reality out there. So that's amazing.
But I couldn't believe though that we were at 30 feet when I finally got him loose from that stupid ass parachute. I pulled
Yeah,
my flotation and we went to the top because it seemed like forever.
I
We were
bet.
just coming to because you could see the surface of the water and you could
Yeah.
see the bubbles coming up. It's like, okay, anytime now.
Were
Then
you
we got
kicking at that point or allowing?
absolutely. Oh yeah.
Okay.
And I had him in a bear hug and I was kicking my ass off, to get to the top, even though I pulled my flotation.
Yeah. Like the CO2 discharge,
Yes.
same one. Yeah.
Yeah. It worked as advertised.
Phew. That's the time you need it to work. Thank
So
you, PRs.
I surfaced twice And the poor guy, he was like, I really felt bad for him because I had a chance to get air. He didn't. And I
Yeah.
just, when I was on my way up for the second time, I thought, if I thought about him trying to breathe. And that's when I thought, I'll give him a shot of air for my SAR one.
Yeah.
And, maybe that'll help. And then it,
Yeah. Be interesting, like a portable, like a Heeds bottle or something.
well,
I
that
don't
was
think.
before we had heats.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. But even nowadays, like how often is that necessary? I mean, it's such a unique circumstance.
Right.
But yeah, man, sounds like you did everything right. You can always go back and like question anything that we do in life because that's us continually assessing and learning. But end result, you're both alive. You live to fight another day. You did as well. So that's
He's a
awesome.
good guy. Like I said, when the whole thing that made it all worthwhile is when we got to the surface, he hugged me
Yeah.
and said, thanks.
Yeah. And that's rare, right? Like you've been in many rescue scenarios. I've had my own, and it's rare that, and that's not what we're after, but it's rare to actually to get that response. Everyone's dealing with the trauma of what just happened and the shock and or the embarrassment if they got in a situation, a lot of, civilian type situations, you might get rescues. Yeah, that is neat. And then you guys were still pretty far offshore, right? In the boat, or did they come around?
The boat came back. And like I said, I'm surprised I didn't go to captain's mast because when I got on the boat, I got in that lieutenant commander's face and practically punched him. I
No.
was so upset. The adrenaline was flowing. He pissed me off because he was willing to leave his friend out there, in the water. And if we wouldn't
Yeah.
have done that, the guy would have drowned. He would have
Yeah.
died.
Yep. Yep. Cause and effect. He would not be here today if you weren't there and if you didn't do the right thing.
And I did. I just unloaded on that lieutenant commander. I thought I was going to get written up, but I had a
Who
chief
cares,
come up.
right? At that moment, like,
I had a chief come up and tell me, he said, he said, hey, Rick, don't worry about this dude. We'll take care of him.
yeah, that's amazing. So after you got back and you're able to kind of process and calm down, like how did you react? Like what did your body go through? A lot of times we'll be in that adrenaline rush of, saving a life or something. And then when you walk away from it, the shakes or, whatever comes. Like how'd you
I
do?
went into there at the SAR shack we had at the other end. The SAR shack at Pax River at that particular time was physically attached to TPS, Test Pilot School. And so we were on the north end of the hangar, our SAR shack, and then our locker room with our lockers and the shower room was on the south end of the hangar, just right across the ramp from where we were. So I walked over there and got in the shower and just took about a 20-minute shower just veg, just think
Yeah.
about what happened and what could have happened if I didn't do what I did. And,
Yeah.
I felt good that I helped this guy. I
Yeah.
really did.
Well, you can tell so many years later, it still impacts you pretty deeply. It's a part of who you are. How would you say that this experience helped you grow as a person, as a swimmer, just in general?
Don't give up. No matter how deep you are, don't give up.
Yeah. Never ever give up.
There's always a fresh breath somewhere. You just got to find it.
Yeah. That's great advice. As a SAR swimmer, I think as a SAR swimmer, it's the ultimate form of serving others, like beyond so many things in life. Um, have you been able to continue that trait of serving others since you've been out?
Absolutely. When I retired, I I could have retired in Pensacola, Florida, and that's where I retired from. It's Pensacola, and it's cheap to live down there. And I couldn't do that because for about the first 6 months, all I did was play golf and fish. And I started going to the Chiefs Club. I knew how that was going to end, so I went back to work. And for the last 17 years, I've worked for a Flight for Life company, and I was a helo mechanic for this Flight for Life company. And I started out as just a wrench, working on the birds. After 5 years of that, they made me maintenance manager. So I was like the director of maintenance for my region. I had 15 helicopters and 18 mechanics. And so when you work on a
Nice.
helicopter, even though I'm not a nurse or the pilot, and they get a call and you watch that bird take off that you just fixed and put back in service to go scrape somebody off the highway or do an interfacility transfer for a kid or a NICU unit, makes you feel
Mhm. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you for your continued service. It's amazing. All right. Should we lighten the mood?
Sure.
Well, I mean, just as far as memories, I mean, you're 30 years, that's a lifetime. That's an amazing run. What do you miss the most?
Camaraderie
Yeah.
with all my buds, you know.
Yeah, and
That's
they're
why
still
we
out
have
there,
the
right?
say what?
They're still out there. I mean,
Oh, I
the ones
know.
that are.
And the only reason I'm in Pensacola, Florida, or not in Colorado, is I lost my house to a hurricane. And so I moved up here for a job with this Flight for Life company. And
Mhm.
otherwise, I'd still be living in Pensacola. Well, up here in Colorado, we're pretty much landlocked, you know. There's not
Mhm.
too many Navy guys around. Occasionally, I'll bump into a few, but not like, living in Pensacola or on the East Coast around PAX or, Norfolk or somewhere like that. So that's why I go to the SAR reunion every 2 years. In April of every 2 years, we have the Search and Rescue Swimmers reunion.
Yep.
Down and have a good time.
Plug it.
And I'm a member of NHA, and every year they have two symposiums. They have the Gulf Coast Fly-In down in Whiting Field,
Mhm.
Florida. I go to that one every year. And then they have the big symposium out in San Diego, which I don't go to that one because I ride a Harley. I do the run for the wall. And whenever they have the NHA out in San Diego, it's the same time as the run for the wall.
Oh, that's too bad. They asked me to speak at this year's, so I'll be out there and, probably signing some books and giving a talk.
That's cool.
That'd be great to, meet up in person at some point, but definitely at the SAR reunion. Yeah, camaraderie is, yeah, you cannot, I mean,
That is what I miss the most.
yeah.
My kids live in Maryland. My daughter lives in Annapolis, and my son lives at Pax River. He's an IT guy for the credit union there on base.
Hmm.
And so whenever I go there 4 or 5 times a year to visit them and my grandkids. And so whenever I go there, I always go down to the SAR shack and hang out with an afternoon with all the guys, SAR guys.
Hmm.
Well, here comes the mass chief. We got to listen to his stories again. They
That's
don't.
right. That's awesome.
But I like talking to young guys, and the one chief, there's two chiefs there, Chief Lowell and Chief Kersendorfer. And whenever I go there, they always show me the new equipment that they
Hmm.
have, which
That's cool.
is light years from what I had. And I
Yeah.
think it's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah. That's neat. That's neat. You get like your little fix,
Yep.
which is important. It keeps
Yeah,
us going. Okay, you ready for a 1 minute hypothetical scenario? You know,
sure.
put your rescue swimmer mask on.
Got it.
Okay. So I chat GPT'd a couple scenarios. I don't know, this is kind of a fun thing to do, right? Just kind of see the mindset of a rescue swimmer. Let me pick one here. How about some sharks? Okay. Okay, you are on your ship. You are the swimmer on Alert 30 helo. You hear now launch the Alert 30 helo. You're running to the ready room, PR shop, getting ready. You're getting misinformation. All you know at this point, it's a multi-casualty rescue in shark-infested waters. A ferry has sunk in tropical waters known for aggressive sharks. Survivors are dispersed, some wounded, attracting sharks. What's going through your head?
How many people? How many are dead? How many are floaters? How many are active? How many are just going to be, they're in shock? They don't know what they're going to do. I'm not concerned about the sharks. Let me tell you. I told you I was on Midway Island. I've punched sharks in the nose to chase them away from me before. We were doing jumps on Midway one time, and and I was swimming back to where they were going to pick me up, and it felt like my fins were being tangled up in a rope. I turned around, there was an 8-foot tiger shark trying to chomp on the ends of my fins. He was just sort of tasting. So I turned around, I punched him in the nose. So sharks don't bother me. Pax River is a breeding ground for bull sharks.
Mm.
We used to get brushed by these guys all the time when we were out there jumping in the water. So I'm not concerned about the sharks. I'm concerned about those poor folks out there. And if there's someone bleeding, yeah, I'm going to be pretty busy, with the survivor in one hand and holding off a shark in the other. I mean, that sounds flippant, but sharks don't, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing you can do about it anyways, so why
Exactly.
focus on it?
All I do is just try to punch them in the nose because
There you go.
they will go away.
Start swinging. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to punch them, right? You just move their head if you're calm
Right.
enough to do it.
Yeah.
But everything that you just said there, I mean, that's exactly it. You're assessing the situation before you're even in the aircraft. Your mind is going, you're mapping out this plan. Once you're in that doorway, you're going to see the reality. You'll shift it around, obviously adapt to whatever scenario is occurring in front of you, but at least you're not just going in with a blank slate. You're already thinking, so you're ready for it. So that's awesome. Nice job. Rick, you've had an incredible experience, 30 years, multiple rescues, and normal people, even normal military cannot relate or really even understand what you've been through. But with that, what's a bit of wisdom that you've learned along the way that you would want the listeners to hear?
Don't give up. Just don't give up. I learned that in SAR school. Like I said, 32 started, 9 of us graduated. That guy that was testing that parachute, he's alive today because I didn't give up.
Yep. No, it's perfect. It's interesting. So, as you know, I climbed Mount Everest back in 2011, and before I went and heard Jim Whittaker, who's the first American to climb Everest. I mean, it was like a couple weeks before I headed over for my 2-month expedition. His advice: never give up. Just keep moving, never give up. So it crosses the line, amongst some of the elite, I guess. But wow, Rick, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I know you have so many more stories, so we'll probably have to get you back on and
Sure.
have some more conversations. And thanks to everyone for listening. And we'll see you on the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Calm in the Chaos podcast. Please subscribe to be notified of future episodes. And if you enjoyed what you just heard, please leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. Until next time, get out there and make a difference so others may live.